Yes, thank you very much for this. I'm logged into two devices because I thought I could use one to show a PowerPoint presentation that I prepared, but I think because I'm going to be reading my text at the same time, this won't be possible. Maybe at the end I can share my screen and show the pictures that I wanted to show. They're not as important to my presentation as what it is that I want to say. I'm a graduate of the University of Leeds, where I completed my undergraduate and postgraduate studies. I have specialized in post-colonial literary and cultural studies, and the title of my PhD thesis was Vaishnavism and Indentured Labor in Mauritian Literature. Recently, I have developed a strong interest in cultural memory, and excuse my straying into self-promotion, I recently published an article titled Sacred Memory, Cultural Orientalism and India in the Plantation Scape of Mauritius. In that publication, I examined a poem called Sita, first published in 1887, and the earliest Mauritian literary engagement with Hinduism that I could locate in the National Library of Mauritius. Actually, it was the earliest engagement with Vaishnavism that I could locate in the National Library of Mauritius. The poem was authored by a man called Léoville Lhomme, a poet and journalist of mixed white European and Indo-Pontifian ancestry. Importantly, he was a Presbyterian. His writings on India, Hinduism, and Indian indentured laborers in Mauritius were strongly inflected by French and British Orientalist discourse about the superiority of European civilization over that of South Asia. In that article, I also analyzed some of his journalistic prose and understood that the organic creolization of Mauritius, a British colony at the time, intervened in the way he married the sacred, both Hinduism and Christianity, with memory. I argued that as a man of color, Lhomme epitomized creolization in Mauritius, and that the cultural memory of Mauritius can be viewed as Creole in nature. So I will give some definitions here that can be very useful. I'm using the works of Jan Assmann to define cultural memory. So he defines cultural memory as the realm of traditions, transmissions, and transferences that is neatly disembodied, exteriorized, objectified, and embedded in cultural institutions and in all kinds of symbolic forms. This realm is passed on from one situation and one generation to another in order to be preserved, circulated, and re-embodied in a society, and to function as knowledge with an identity index. Cultural memory disseminates and reproduces a consciousness of unity, particularity, and a sense of belonging among the members of a group. So most of that was constituted of his own words. But I have inferred that, and this is something that scholars working in cultural memory agree upon, that cultural memory can hold extremely exclusionary meanings and can become dangerous in multicultural contexts. So in Mauritius, what I have concluded is that creolization has intervened to save Hindu cultural memory, once suffering from minority status due to the subaltern position occupied by Hindus when they arrived under indenture from India. So one of the earliest thinkers on creolization, Kamau Brathwaite, affirms that creolization is a process, not a product. It is cracked, fragmented, ambivalent, not certain of itself, subject to shifting lights and pressures because of the complex historical factors in its making, including more than one mother or ancestral culture still locked in competition for ascendancy in former plantation colonies. Again, these were mostly his words. However, tragedies, what he calls tragedies arising from plantation, sit side by side with creativity and unexpected exchanges. I'm going to move on to Edouard Glissant and his definition of creolization. So Glissant has gone on to highlight that creolization is not merely an encounter, a shock, a métissage, but a new and original dimension, allowing each person to be there and elsewhere, rooted and open. This métissage is limitless, its elements diffracted, and its consequences unforeseeable, and the consequent explosion of cultures is the violent sign of their consensual, not imposed sharing. All of that also from Glissant. So approaching cultural memory through the lens of creolization allowed me to aver that in Lum's case, an intercultural dialogue between Hinduism and Christianity took place in his poem about Sita, despite its Orientalist tropes. This dialogue creolized cultural memory in Mauritius. Creole cultural memory reversed the logic that Western culture makes one civilized, and by the same token, contributed both to the preservation of Hindu cultural memory and inter-ethnic community building. So helped in inter-ethnic community building in the decades leading up to the island's decolonization. But since Lum wrote, there has been a major shift in power structures in Mauritius, with Hindus gaining a cultural, socio-economic, and political ascendancy, due to which the island has very often been called, and I think very erroneously so, it has been called a Little India. In my forthcoming publication, I analyzed the novel Alma, authored by the Nobel laureate G.M.G. Leclésio, who is of Franco-Mauritian descent. The novel explores competing Mauritian myths of origins and how one Hindu myth in particular risks obliterating the cultural memory of non-Hindus in an island where Hindu cultural memory was itself once threatened. My case study is Ganga Talab, literally the Ganges Lake, a landmark in the sacred geography of Hinduism in Mauritius. I have pictures of Ganga Talab, which I will show at the end of my text. The focal point of pilgrimage for thousands of Hindus, especially during Mahashivratri or the Great Night of Shiva, the lake is believed to be directly connected to the Ganges through a tunnel running beneath the Indian Oceanic floor. Water from the Ganges was poured into Ganga Talab as official confirmation of the myth in the 1960s, solidifying the ancestral link between Indo-Mauritians and India by the same token. Since 108 feet tall deities of Shiva and Durga dominate the landscape around the lake, amidst deities and shrines dedicated to other Hindu divinities, including a hill that devotees climb and on top of which a temple dedicated to Hanuman is to be found. Well before the canonization of Ganga Talab, however, there existed two similar myths. This is something I learned through an anthropologist working on Mauritius and its sacred geography. So one of these myths posited that the same lake conjoined the French diaspora of Mauritius and Réunion Island, its neighbor. The other myth posited that the lake sustained the tie between enslaved Malagasys and Madagascar, the homeland. But these myths fell into oblivion, displaced by the Hindu one that became hegemonic. Significantly, descendants of enslaved Malagasys, East Africans, and South Indians remain largely marginalized in Mauritius. They have come to be known as the Creole community. Leclésio does not dispute the myth of Ganga Talab in his novel. Instead, he inserts Ganga Talab into the sovereign realm of an ancestral maroon slave spirit. The spirit is demonized in the novel, just like maroons or runaway slaves were long criminalized in official and popular discourse as threats to the cohesion of the colony. In Leclésio's novel, it is the ancestral maroon spirit who benevolently leads to the discovery of the lake in the late 19th century. So while this can be controversial for Hindus and a serpentine manner of consolidating Hindu hegemony for others, this rewriting does other things as well. The excavation of two languishing myths problematizes the ethnicization of public space in a multicultural country, underlines the lake's identity as shared site of ancestral memory, and disentangles the past from its actual demons, pointing once again to how cultural memory is actually Creole in Mauritius. The integration of one subaltern community's traumatic memories, so the traumatic memories of slaves, into another sacred geography, the sacred geography of Hindus, highlight how one myth's of origins inevitably intersects with that of the other, points to that other's existence, and subverts solidified and potentially disparaging notions of Hindu purity. In Mauritius, at least. The novel points to the urgent need to revive forgotten cultural memories that are not Hindu for non-exclusionary purposes and reparation towards colonialism's other subjects, irrespective of their origins, through an approach to cultural memory that goes through creolization as theoretical concept. This Creole cultural memory has the potential of showcasing the dynamism and profundity of Hinduism as articulated in its sacred texts, and especially for the notion that all living beings are similar in spiritual essence. But although I retain the use of the descriptive Creole for cultural memory because my usage harks back to a highly productive field of academic study, the term Creole has strong ethnic and socio-economic connotations as pointed to before. It remains a strongly contested term, rejected by Hindus in Mauritius to describe their lifestyle and behavior, although intercultural contact is more common nowadays, and basically everybody is eating the same food at home. This is just a small way in which I feel that creolization is very common in Mauritius. Because of strong institutionalized, including cultural, economic, and inevitably political links with India, Hindus in Mauritius furthermore seek to attach themselves to a pure Hindu identity modeled upon one that they imagine exists in India. So I would like to end with a few self-reflective questions about my use of terminology as an academic from a multicultural country, but of Hindu background. Is an alternative term more palatable to Hindus required? Could such a term capture the sense of visceral exchange, all the dissonances, fractures, yet creativity in the way that Creole does for a country, a former plantation colony like Mauritius? So that's how I'm going to end. I'm going to thank you very much for your attention. And I'm going to do a share screen. Hopefully I can, to share my my pictures of Ganga Talab. So I have a few pictures of Ganga Talab here. So, okay, the picture. So you can see in the front, you can see the deity of Durga. And at the back, a bit further to the right-hand side, you see the deity of Shiva, and the sense of scale can be seen if we contrast these two deities with the small cars and the people at the bottom on the right-hand side corner of the picture. So these are other pictures. This is another picture to see, to demonstrate how these deities are actually extremely towering. On the left-hand side, you will see that that was the point at which the deity of Durga was being erected. Another picture that of these two deities, and here this is a picture that I took of the Hanuman deity at the top of the hill that I mentioned earlier. So that's about it. Thank you so much.